Hey everyone, we've got a lot of interesting weather changes on the way over the next couple of weeks. And in today's video, I'm going to break down everything you need to know about what to expect. There's a lot happening, including more snow, the return of severe weather, and the possibility of more cold air sweeping across the country. We're also looking at another large storm system later this month that could bring both winter weather and severe storms. So there's definitely a lot to keep an eye on. Let's jump into it. Over the next couple of weeks, the U.S. is going to be impacted by multiple storm systems. We're expecting more snowfall, maybe even the return of severe weather, and we'll definitely see more shots of cold air moving through the country between now and early February. There's also the potential for another major storm system that could bring both winter weather and severe weather as we move later into the month and into early February. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start by talking about what's going on right now. So first off, the good news is that we're done with that historic winter storm that brought massive snowfalls to areas along the Gulf Coast. I'm sure you remember how crazy that storm was, especially for places that don't usually see snow. We saw areas along the Outer Banks in North Carolina getting 8 to 10 inches of snow, and Milton, Florida, saw nearly 10 inches of snow in just one day. That actually broke a record for the most snow in a single day, which was previously 4 inches set back in 1954. So yeah, that was a big deal. In fact, a lot of daily snowfall records were broken, even in places like New Orleans. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. But now that winter storm has moved out and we're done talking about it, the aftermath, however, is still lingering. We've got some cloudy skies across the Gulf Coast in Florida, and that's really keeping things chilly and preventing any sunshine from breaking through. It's also making for pretty gloomy conditions, and that's going to stick around for about the next 24 hours. Things will start to warm up as we get closer to the weekend, but for now, we're still dealing with some dreary weather. Up in the Northeast, there's some light snow flurries possible, but nothing too major to worry about today. The rest of the country is looking pretty calm right now, but one thing I do want to bring to your attention is a wildfire that sparked in Southern California yesterday. It started out at around 500 acres, but quickly grew to nearly 10,000 acres in just a few hours. The fire is located just north of Los Angeles, near Santa Clarita, and there have been evacuation orders issued. It's definitely a serious situation, and our thoughts are with everyone in that area. The good news is that the winds aren't as intense as they were a couple of weeks ago when we saw hurricane force winds, but the winds are still strong enough to spread the fire quickly. There have been some reports of structures being damaged, so we're hoping that the rain expected later this weekend will help control the situation. It's a bit of a rare event to see wildfires like this in January, especially with the Santa Ana winds, but hopefully the rain will come through and give firefighters a much needed break. Now let's talk about this insane satellite imagery from yesterday afternoon. Take a look at how much snow covered areas like Texas, Georgia, and the Carolinas all the way into Florida. That cloud cover was basically draping over all Florida, and it's just crazy to think about how much snow is on the ground in those areas. This is definitely a rare event, and we're probably not going to see anything like this for decades, if not longer. So if you still have snow on the ground, definitely enjoy it while you can, because it's not going to last much longer. Most of the snow will likely melt by tomorrow afternoon, but the areas that will hold on to snow the longest will be in Georgia, South Carolina, and eastern North Carolina. It's pretty wild to think that areas like Iowa and the Dakotas currently have less snow on the ground than places like Louisiana and Florida. It really shows how unusual this storm was for this time of year. Now let's talk about what's coming up next in the forecast. The weather patterns in the coming weeks are going to be very different from what we've been experiencing so far this winter. One of the main things to keep an eye on is the jet stream. As we go through today, the jet stream winds are pretty strong, especially from Texas all the way up to the Northeast. So if you're flying today, particularly from Florida to the Midwest or vice versa, expect a lot of turbulence due to those strong upper level winds. However, as we get into Friday and Saturday, we're going to see a big shift in the jet stream. The winds are going to flatten out, which means we'll get a more zonal flow. Basically, winds moving from west to east. This kind of flow usually brings milder weather and calmer conditions to most of the country. So expect a more peaceful weekend weather-wise for most of the U.S. with less extreme weather overall. That being said, I do want to highlight one thing to watch for on Saturday. There's going to be a little dip in the jet stream over the West Coast, and that's going to bring some moisture and rain to California this weekend. This will be helpful in the fight against the wildfires, but there's also a risk that thunderstorms could spark new fires. So we need to keep an eye on that. This dip in the jet stream is going to move very slowly, and by Monday, it's still going to be hanging out over the West Coast. By next Wednesday, though, this disturbance will begin to move across the Rockies and head towards the Great Plains and Ohio Valley. This is likely going to be the next big storm system to watch for. It may bring heavy snow and possibly even severe weather as it tracks eastward, but we're still a few days out from that. So it's too early to say for sure how intense it will be. That said, it's taking a similar track to the winter storm we had a couple of weeks ago that brought 12 inches of snowed areas like Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. While I'm not saying it's going to be exactly the same, it's definitely going to be similar in how it moves across the country. Looking ahead even further, the GFS model is showing that we might see more Arctic blasts coming into the U.S. in early February. This is still far out, but it's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on. As we move into early February, we could see another significant cold snap. Now, let's take a closer look at the forecast for this weekend. We're going to see some light to moderate snow moving across the Great Lakes, but don't expect much in terms of accumulation. There will also be some snow showers in the Rockies and some rain in California this weekend, which will help with the wildfire situation. Over the next week, the weather is going to get a little more interesting. We'll see some moisture moving up from the Gulf, bringing showers and thunderstorms to the deep south. This could also bring snow to the Four Corners region and parts of Southern California, which is good news for the wildfires. By the start of next week, we've got a winter storm in Canada that might affect the Northeast, but it's still too early to know exactly where or how much snow will fall. This could change, so I'll keep you updated as we get closer. By Wednesday, that disturbance will move over the Rockies and into the southern plains, bringing rain and snow to the deep south and Gulf Coast. By the end of the week, we may see snow and ice in the Ohio Valley and Northeast, but again, the forecast is still uncertain since we're about a week out. The Canadian model shows a similar disturbance, but it's a little further west. The European model is also showing that same system forming along the Gulf Coast and potentially turning into a huge nor'easter by next weekend. As we take a closer look at the temperature trends, you'll notice that even though the most extreme cold is moving out, there's still going to be some lingering chilly air across parts of the country. The central and eastern U.S. will continue to see below average temperatures for a little while longer, though they will gradually moderate. By this weekend, we'll see a noticeable warm up in the plains and the upper Midwest. But that doesn't mean we're headed straight for spring. We're still in the heart of winter. And February has the potential to bring another round of cold air and active weather. Meanwhile, out west, there's something pretty interesting developing. A cutoff low pressure system is spinning off the coast of Southern California, and that could bring some much needed precipitation to the region. Now, if you've been following the weather, you know that Southern California has been dealing with a worsening drought and the wildfire concerns have been growing. In fact, just a few hours ago, a major wildfire broke out east of San Diego. Any moisture that can reach this area would be incredibly beneficial, not just for the drought, but also for helping to slow down those fires. It's not going to be a major storm, but it should be enough to at least dampen the ground and provide some relief. Taking a look at precipitation trends for the rest of this week and into the weekend, we're still dealing with lake effect snow across the Great Lakes. The cold air moving over the relatively warmer waters of the lakes is creating persistent snow bands. And that's going to continue for at least another day or two. Areas around Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario are all seeing snow. And if you live in these areas, be prepared for difficult travel conditions. The heavier snow bands can create whiteout conditions at times, and some locations could see another 8 to 12 inches of accumulation before all is said and done. In addition to the lake effect snow, we also have a clipper system dropping down from Canada. This will bring some surprise snowfall to parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the northern U.S. over the next couple of days. Areas like North Dakota, northern Minnesota, and the upper Great Lakes will see light to moderate snow. And as this system moves eastward, it could bring snow into southeastern Canada, upstate New York, and northern New England by Sunday. Now, let's talk about the drought situation in the Southwest, because this is something that doesn't always get a lot of attention, but is incredibly important. Southern California, along with parts of Arizona and New Mexico, has been dealing with a severe and extreme drought. Yes, it's a desert and it's always dry, but this has been an especially bad season and it's not doing any favors for the wildfire situation. The good news is that we do have some moisture on the way. By Saturday night, rain will start to return to parts of California, particularly in the foothills and Southern California. The higher elevations in the Sierra Nevada will see snow, while lower elevations get some beneficial rain. This pattern will continue into early February, and while we're not looking at a major storm, even isolated areas picking up over an inch of rain will be helpful. As we head into next week, things start to get really interesting across the lower 48. The European model is showing another clipper system moving through the upper Great Lakes and Ontario early in the week, which is consistent with the pattern we've been seeing. But by midweek, we have a developing system in the southern plains that could bring snow to Colorado and New Mexico, rain to Texas and Oklahoma, and even the potential for thunderstorms by Thursday. Next weekend, we could be looking at a much larger winter storm developing across the Midwest and Great Lakes. Both the European and GFS models are showing this potential, but the exact details are still uncertain. The track intensity and precipitation amounts are still up in the air, but this is definitely something we need to watch closely. If you live in cities like Minneapolis, Des Moines, Omaha, Chicago, Milwaukee, or Green Bay, you could finally be seeing some significant snowfall. Meanwhile, the southern side of the system could bring heavy rain and even severe weather to parts of the south. Beyond that, as we move into early February, we're looking at yet another pattern shift. This time, we're seeing high pressure build over the south to southeast, which will keep temperatures milder in those areas, while the colder air remains locked into the northern plains, northwest, and parts of southwest Canada. And here's where things get even more interesting. Between February 1st and 8th, we have the potential for another significant storm system. The European model is showing a parade of storms coming off the Pacific and tracking across the Rockies and northern U.S., while the GFS highlights the potential for a winter storm around February 3rd or 4th. If you're in cities like Minneapolis, Des Moines, Omaha, Chicago, Milwaukee, or Green Bay, this could finally bring some of the snow you've been missing. Meanwhile, the southern side of these systems could bring another round of heavy rain and thunderstorms. Worse, we're still several days out, so the details will change. The storm track, snowfall amounts, and areas impacted will all shift as we get closer. But the key takeaway here is that we are heading into a very active period, and we need to be prepared. Even though we're moving into February, severe weather can happen any time of the year, and we'll be keeping a close eye on both the wintry and stormy sides of these systems. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates. Thanks for watching, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.